Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Dylan Golby and welcome to Jeju Island here in South Korea. Now I'm standing here at Sagyeri, which is one of the volcanic mounds that was created when the main volcano here, Hallasan, erupted in the past. And now this is actually where they hold one of the fire festivals, in one of the traditional festivals here in Jeju. So I'm going to do a short hike up here because it is the middle of the day and there's not a lot to shoot. But for the next few days I am going to be driving slowly around the coast and shooting some sunrises and sunsets. And in this video we're going to explore a few tips for working with wide-angle lenses. So after that hike, I drove down to Sagyeri, which is a small coastal town at the southwest of the island. And as you can see behind me, there's a small peak, Sanbangsan, and then off to this side is actually the Yongmori Haean. So this is a very popular tourist destination, but not so many people down on this beach. They're all sort of walking along the cliffs over there. And so I'm just scouting for tomorrow morning sunrise in the hope that basically as I walk along here I can find some interesting foreground to use with the Samyang 12mm and be able to really sort of emphasize that and still include these things in the background. And what I was hoping for was actually to be able to put Hallasan, the volcanic peak, between Sanbangsan and the Yongmori Haean. But unfortunately, as you walk along, they've got a rather historically significant but sort of quite ugly in the sense that we're dealing with sort of some natural surroundings and then a man-made object, but a boat that represents the first Dutchman that arrived on Jeju Island here. And so that doesn't really work for my composition and it sort of blocks a bit of Hallasan. So I don't think I'm going to be able to include all three, but I am going to quickly check out some little sort of volcanic lumps that are covered in moss here. A lot of people use those as a foreground, so I'll see if I can make those work as well. Working with a wide-angle lens, it does pay to explore your foreground quite a bit. So I know that my background I want to be Sanbangsan, the peak on the left there, and I also want to include the Yongmori Haean, which is the little area that juts out in the background on the right there. You've also got Hallasan, but I don't think that I'll be able to get it in from here as it sort of hides itself behind the other peaks. But you do get that lovely stream of clouds that's sort of generated in the winter by Hallasan. So what I'm basically doing as I walk along here is trying to find sections that will work. So here, with a wide angle, I get a lovely curve in the water, some beautiful rocks in the foreground. And that's definitely one that I could use. So let's keep walking along. And then as we get to here, we lose that curve, but we have some beautiful rocks in the water that could definitely form a bit of a leading line towards Sanbangsan. Now if we keep moving along from here, we start to get some of this mossy coastline. And while I don't think that in and of itself here these will work, as the sun is going to rise on the right hand side of the frame here, so the wrong side of them will be lit and it won't get that sort of three-dimensional look to it, I do think that as we get up on top of them, we'll start to see some other things that might work. So let's jump out here quickly. And I think here we can start to use some of the shapes in the tide pools. So you'll definitely see that parts of the rocks will catch light at sunrise. As we move onto the other side of that section I was just at, you see again we have this nice curve in the water. And definitely if we can find some foreground to use, I think this will be a really interesting image as well. So maybe even something like this, so we have these two rocks and the curve in the water along with that shelf on the right there, and then Sanbangsan and Yongmori Haean, which should both catch the morning light. So what I'm trying to achieve by finding a foreground here is just giving the image some sort of context, giving it a grounding, giving it a place to start and something to lead your eye into the frame. Of course, we could just use ocean and the mountain, but it becomes a little bit simple and it really only gives you one thing to look at. So with a wide-angle lens, you have the ability to make foregrounds look a lot larger than maybe they do to your eyes, or a lot larger than they would if you were, say, up on the embankment here and shooting down with a longer lens. And so what we're basically trying to do is look for something that will give this a sense of place, and I'll be able to decide on exactly what I'm going to use tomorrow morning when I see the conditions, when I see how far up the tide is, when I see where the light is hitting. And once I've got those things, hopefully I'll be able to create a really sort of an interesting image that leads you through and takes you up to that mountain and the coastline there. So while I was scouting along here, I decided to quickly check the path of the sun this afternoon, and it does look like it's going to be going down just across here, so it should give some really nice warm side light to these formations here at around about 4 or 4:30. And so I think I'm going to come back here and take a look at something like this or this before heading up to my sunset location to see if I can catch that sort of alpine glow along Hallasan. Back down in Sagyeri now and much closer to sunset. So right now, I'd say we've got about 20 minutes or half an hour before the sun gets quite close to what is the horizon from this perspective. And at the moment, I've settled on a couple of compositions that I think work quite well, and I'll show you those now. Basically, the main issue with them right now is that the sun is still so high that it's actually casting my shadow, or the shadow of the tripod, into the frame. And so I'm going to wait for it. It's basically going to be going a little bit over this way again, so hopefully that will get my shadow out, or at least most of the shadow out, and I'll be able to remove the last little pieces of it in post. Here's my first composition. Now, as you can see, my shadow is still in the frame. The sun hasn't quite gone down far enough. But what we're doing here is basically, I'm down really, really low next to this rock shelf, and I'm basically using that to lead you in from the right-hand side of the frame. And then on the left-hand side of the frame, we've got these beautiful mossy rocks that are being lit up by the sun. And in the background, I have Sanbang San on the left and the Yongmorihean on the right. And then we've got this sort of beautiful wash of water coming in as the tide comes in. And that also comes up between the two rocks on the right-hand side of the frame as well. So I'm going to try and do quite a long exposure here to make sure that I do get that water coming up in here and get a little bit of whitewash so that it sort of forms a bit of a graphic element. And here it comes now, so you can sort of see what I'm aiming for there. I want to have that come in. In terms of filters, I am using a CPL to deepen the colors a little bit. Also just take a little bit of the sheen off the top of that water so it remains quite dark. And then we see the beautiful whitewash on the left-hand side. I've also got a 3-stop soft-edged graduated filter to bring down that sky. And I hope you guys can hear me properly. I've actually lost the dead cat from my microphone, so hopefully that wind isn't killing this too much. And the final filter that I have is a 10-stop that I'm using to just bring that shutter speed out to about 60 seconds to make sure I can get quite a few waves and smooth out that water and make sure that the focus stays on the mountain and not on the ripples in the water. Good morning, everybody. I'm back down at Sagyeri just before the sun comes up, and the thing that came to mind was, when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Nobody really tells you what to do when life gives you a big bag of durians when you were hoping to make lemonade. Seoul has sent us a lovely cloud of pollution that has sort of just put this haze into the air, and that coupled with the sunrise having that band of clouds that it usually does from Hallasan has meant that this shot just simply isn't going to happen until much later in the morning. So what I'm going to do is drive up the coast and just try to make the best of a bad situation. Hopefully I can use a little bit of that pollution as some layers in a composition with a slightly longer lens. So while not directly related to this video, let's go give that a go. Okay, so definitely working with what I've been given right now. I found this nice set of rocks that is just about to go underwater as the tide is coming in. So I'm going to quickly get a shot of these with the water rolling over them and the brother islands in the background there. Looking back towards Hallasan and Sanbangsan, it's just a wash. There's just so much pollution in the air. You can barely even see them. So I'm just going to work with some foreground here and make the best of a situation. So for this shot, I'm using the ND32 and CPL combination from my Freewell magnetic kit. Now I will have a review coming up of this soon, so if you're interested in it, do get subscribed so you can get a notification for that. But what I'm using this filter for is basically to give myself a bit of a longer exposure so I can smooth out a bit of this incoming tide and basically focus your attention on the rocks rather than on the waves. And also using the CPL to just take off a little bit of the glare from those rocks. So basically the rising sun over here is giving me a white reflection on the top of the rocks, and they just sort of look like white blobs in the water. But with this guy, I'm able to just basically finesse the amount of that reflection that I want to have on those rocks and make them into a bit more of a pattern that leads you out to the brother islands. Okay, Okay, so final settings here. With the ND32 on the front, I'm able to get 10 seconds at f22, and I'm at about 50 millimeters on the 45 to 100 with the GFX here. And I've decided to raise the center column of the tripod up a little bit here, just so that I can get up above these rocks a little bit more and look down the path that's going between them. Now, we've only got a light breeze, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem, but still, I'm using a 2-second timer, and I'm going to take quite a few shots of this just to make sure that I've got one that is tack sharp. For one day, along with sorting out my own location audio issues, I'm going to find a way to actually end a video on location as well, but until then, welcome back to the office. Now, with all lenses, it's important to scout first before you start shooting, but especially when it comes to wide-angle lenses, because of the way you can dramatically change the foreground by simply, getting closer or further away or moving left and right, it's really important to explore your options before settling on a composition. And paying attention to how large and small things get in the frame will help you judge how much visual weight they'll have in the final composition and how much they'll draw the eye. So it's also very important to check the corners of your composition, as unwanted objects can quickly sneak into the frame when working with wide-angle lenses. And one of the ones that still gets me from time to time is the legs of my tripod, especially when working in the dark, because they're black as well. However, a stray rock, a stick, or a piece of garbage sneaking into the corner can mean having to crop the composition and potentially throw it off in post-production, or spend way too long cloning out something that you could have just spent seconds paying attention to on location and really not had to spend the time on the computer. So this video from Jeju is getting ridiculously long, and so I've decided to break it up into 2 pieces. So I'll be back in the next video with several additional tips and some more photos from this trip. But I hope you've enjoyed this discussion so far about finding foregrounds, as well as what to do when things really don't go your way. So thanks again for watching, and if you haven't already, please do like and subscribe. Cheers!